Good evening. I'm calling this meeting to order. The time is approximately 5:30 p.m. In accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. This meeting is officially open with a quorum present. This evening, students from Lowry Road Elementary School will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. In just a minute, Assistant Principal Amelia Wilson will introduce our students. But first, let's stand for the pledges.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
President Jackson, members of the school board, Dr. Scribner, it is indeed an honor for us to be here this evening. I have this evening with me Ezekiel Burris, which is a fourth grade student, Destiny Turner, I lost my train of thought, Destiny Turner, she's also a fourth grade student, and Ava Sparks, a fifth grade student. They are all three part of our leadership team at Lowry Road, and we're just honored to have them here. And we also have one of our STUCO sponsors, Miss Kim Greer is here with us, so she works with these students on their activities all through the year. So we are excited to have her here as well. And we also have family members here. So this is Destiny's family. She brought the whole family. So we are excited to have her here. Ezekiel's father is back there. Would you stand up, Mr. Burris? Thank you. And Ava is here with Ms. Greer this evening. So we are excited to have them here. And thank you for allowing us to come and share with you this afternoon.
Great job. Thank you all for being here, and thanks to the parents and staff also for being here. It's always great to have you in the house with us. Clint Bond, right now from our Communications Department, will begin our recognitions.
President Jackson, members of the board, Dr. Scribner, our greeters this evening are from the Army JROTC unit at O.D. Wyatt High School, where Marriott Lane is the principal. Cadets, if you would stand as I call your name, please. Cadet First Lieutenant Emmanuel Osoroto, Cadet Sergeant First Class Win Tang, Cadet Sergeant Abigail Obregon, and Cadet Sergeant Josie Morales. If you would help in joining, thanking them for being here this evening. The Army instructors are Command Sergeant Major James Esters and Master Sergeant Irving Grant, and the Senior Army instructor is Chief Warrant Officer Rucker. So thank you again to them. This evening, Mrs. Moss has asked that we introduce Maurice Spruill. Mr. Spruill, could you stand for just a moment, sir? Maurice was with the first graduating class at Dunbar High School in May of 1957. While at Dunbar, Mr. Spruill was an athlete, an artist, and a member of the student council. The senior class was tasked with deciding what to name the school, what the alma mater would be, the school colors, and the mascot. Mr. Spruill said he prepared sketches of football players in various colors of uniform, and the athletes selected blue and white and the Wildcat mascot. As a member of the student council, he helped decide on the alma mater and on keeping the name of the school Paul Lawrence Dunbar High School. Well, at his graduation ceremony, the superintendent called him to stage to accept a citizenship award. He was presented with a plaque. The superintendent told him the award, when presented at other high schools, had always gone to a female student, and this was the first time it was being presented to a male student. When the ceremony was over, Maurice wasn't sure if he was supposed to keep it or not. So he gave it to a teacher and never saw it again. There are no photos of Mr. Sproul with the award. After all, it was a surprise, and no one in his family was prepared for that. He doesn't remember if anyone with the school took any photos either, but he's never seen any. So that's the story. After hearing it, Mrs. Moss proposed presenting Mr. Sproul with a more lasting remembrance of the award that he can take with him this evening. So if Mrs. Moss would come forward, we'll make the presentation. I'll hold it for you.
Okay. On behalf of Fort Worth ISD and all of us and the Dunbar, the first Dunbar class, 1967, 57, we want to say we appreciate you and thank you for all of your service. And we hope that this will take the place of that lost achievement that you did. And we do apologize for not being able to find the original. But if you're talking about 1957, it was no way we could find it. But this is to replace it. And we have your picture there. Yeah. Did you see the, did you watch the overhead? Did you see all of the pictures of your high school graduating class?
I'm very humbled to this award, and it's been about 62 years, so it was a long time coming. But I never thought this would happen again, but it did, and I just appreciate Ms. Moss and all others that had something to do with it. Even the late Reba Carey, he had something to say about that as well. So I'm just proud to accept this award. And again, I say I'm very humbled to it. It is very, I'm just humbled to be able to accept this award. And again, and it's really been a privilege. I'm just glad to be here to accept it. I have a friend of mine, her name is Denise Harrell, and she elected to come with me. So I said, so I wanted to bring her, get somebody with me. So she said she would.
Thank you, Mr. Sproul, and I have to say that I think the reason they can't find your certificate is it's 1977. You look very young for that to have been 1957. This concludes our scheduled recognitions. We'll take a short recess so our guests may depart if they so choose. Moving on to number 4, Lone Star Governance Student Support Services Update. Dr. Scribner, would you like to make a few comments before this presentation?
Thank you, President Jackson. We were asked to present on student support services, particularly from our lens of equity and racial equity. Drs. Washington and Pena, along with Mr. Michael Steinert and Sherry Breed, will be making the presentation this evening. I'll turn it over to Dr. Washington.
Thank you. So a priority focus has been to address disproportionality of students who receive referrals and to provide social-emotional structure to assist with the needs of our students. Ms. Breed will share how equity is being embedded and designed to support the students and improve campus culture.
As you know, we've started on a journey to achieve systemic equity transformation in our district. We began with the understanding that our beliefs drive our behaviors, and our behaviors drive the outcomes that we receive and the actions that we take. We started our work first by starting with the common vocabulary, which was explaining the differences between equity and equality. Equal does not mean equity. So we started that so we would all have that common understanding. Then we began with the building the skill of our participants. And we did that by introducing all participants into the protocol, which was the way they could have a facilitated conversation about race and equity. And then we moved on to capacity, because we're trying to be, all of us are trying to become adaptive leaders and come up with adaptive solutions when we are faced with challenges. We've engaged in partnerships with a number of organizations for our student leadership programs. This slide, you see a number of the organizations that we've partnered with. You see the number of students and the number of campuses that have had the opportunity to participate in the programs. I mentioned being an adaptive leader, and in our work with our Girls Leadership Program, with Girls, Inc., we were adaptive in our solution and very intentional. We first identified 11 schools with the highest discipline referrals, and you see those schools listed there. And then we established criteria to select the girls that would participate in the program. And we selected girls that had 4 or more referrals or 2 or more out-of-school suspensions. By the spring, end of the spring, we had 377 students of young ladies of color that were participating in the leadership program. Because we wanted to hear the student voice and hear the perspective from our young ladies of how we could support them, we had 44 young ladies participate in a focus group, which was led by our Director of Data and Assessment, and that's Dr. Stacy Burrell, and Restorative Practice Specialists conducting those. To date, we have 465 girls currently in our Girls Leadership Program. And something for you to know about the program is it does look differently at each of the campuses, because our principals, working along with their staff, had the opportunity to customize the program to meet the needs of their specific campus. So that means some have the meetings with the girls during lunch, others have them in classes, and there's a variety of formats. I've shared with you in the past the format for our seminars and how we are rolling out our equity training. But here, just as an update, you see all of the various seminars that we've been engaged in the district. You see the number of individuals that have participated. I would like to point out, as a point of pride, we have 7 schools participating in our SOAR, Students Organized for Anti-Racism. And we currently have 60 students participating, and this is just a joy to be with these racially conscious young people. Our next steps and how we're moving forward, we are continuing to build capacity for our racial equity work, and we are identifying and still looking for internal facilitators so that we can continue the seminars within district. And we are moving our training from central level, even with the campus principals, taking it to the campuses with teachers, leaders, as well as other staff there through our equity walks. That's our SPELL, Special Education and English Language Learners, along with our CARE work, it's Collaborative Action Research for Equity, which are teacher leaders and other staff members that have the opportunity to visit one another's classrooms and identify trends that they see that are specific to the nature of their campus. And we will continue our DELT equity walks, where board trustees, leadership team have the opportunity to engage with staff at the campus level.
When we look at the broader discipline trends across the district, there's 3 metrics that are really key to us to understand what's happening behaviorally in the classroom and then at the campus level. Those are teacher referrals, out-of-school suspensions, and then the days of lost instruction that result from those suspensions. So on this slide, you'll see the top bullet in each of these categories is actually data going back to 2013-14. That's important because that's the year that Fort Worth ISD started implementing positive behavioral supports training and started providing online strategies for teachers to use in their classroom. So if you look at the raw number to the right of those dates, that shows how many incidents occurred in 13-14. The percentage decrease to the right of that is how far we've come in those last 5 years, so from then to today. If you look at last year's data for 17-18, we had double-digit decreases across the board. And then talking about where we're at this fall versus last fall, that last bullet, you can see we had 4% decrease in teacher referrals versus last year, a 7% drop in suspensions, and a 4% decrease in days of lost instruction. And in the folder we gave you, you'll see there's a couple campus-level breakdowns that will show you the fall data from last year versus this year if you want to look at your campuses. I want to take a moment to talk about the specific grade level breakdowns. So in this slide, we're looking at our pre-K through 3rd grade suspensions. And on the left-hand side, you'll see what it looked like last year And you may remember, we had a precipitous drop, largely due in fact because of the change in law and then our election to change our policy up through third grade. So we expected that. To date this fall, we actually have seen an increase, particularly in the third grade incidents. And so that's 37% increase, amounts to about 70 incidents more this fall than last year. I've also included an insert that shows you the disproportionality of suspensions and what that looks like specifically for pre-K through third grade students. So we talk about the district-wide level being 2 to 1 in terms of African-American students. At pre-K through 3 is our highest level of African-American disproportionality. At 74% of those kids that are suspended are African-American. And keep in mind, too, that even though we have the restriction on suspensions, those students that have serious offenses that involve assault, weapons, or drug offenses and create a safety concern at the campuses, these are the kids that are being suspended. If we move on to, oh, I lost my slide. So I think we've lost our fourth grade slide, but I'm going to speak to it. If we move on to the fourth and fifth grade slide, which should be in your packet, we saw a 40% decrease last year for fourth and fifth grade, which was largely due in part because of teachers and administrators at the elementary changing what they were doing because of the change in law and policy. So that had a spillover effect to our fourth and fifth grade students. This year so far, we've seen a decrease excuse me, of about 1%. So we're flat at that level. The disproportionality for our fourth and fifth graders is 67% African American, a little bit lower than our pre-K through third, but still significantly high. If we move on to our middle school students, last year we had a pretty significant decrease there of 12%. So far we're 11% down. This is particularly important because 60% of all the kids we suspend are middle school students. So when you think about the raw number that this 11% represents, it's a bunch of kids. And the disproportionality here is about 51% African American. And then lastly, if we talk about our high school kids, we were down 11% last year. So far this fall, 4% versus last year. And they're at 56% African American representation. So when we talk about what we're doing adaptively, as Mrs. Breed mentioned, to change adult behaviors, to support students, and to get ahead of their behaviors at the campus level, PBIS is a huge part of that, and that work that we started in 13-14 is a long-term commitment to changing things at the campus level. But we also recognize that there's a need for a refresh on our PBIS strategies and training. There's a need for a refresh on our RTI strategies and training. And so I've been working closely with Dr. Washington and Dr. Pena and developing a set of modules with the intention of pushing those out strategically to make sure that we get all of our stakeholders, teachers and administrators, starting in the fall, the most current resources available with respect to PBIS strategies and RTI strategies in the classroom. The social emotional learning work that we're doing with C&I is really going to be a big part moving forward. The fact that we're focusing on trauma-informed services at the elementary level is really starting to have an impact with our little kids that have pretty serious histories. And then when we talk about our restorative practice training, you know, to date, every year our campuses, our administrators get a half a day of training to refresh where they're at with that work. All of our student support staff are getting 2 full days of that training. And when we talk about campus-wide, teachers actually using it in the classroom. Since we started in 2016, 2017, we've trained almost 1,500 of our school teachers. So it's only a third of where we want to get to. As I said, this is a long-term commitment and it's a long journey, but we're really seeing the impact that we would like. And then specifically with some of the data around our RP campuses, last year we saw significant decreases across the district in suspensions and referrals. Our RP campuses saw even greater decreases, which was very encouraging. This year so far, if we just look at this fall versus last fall, more moderate decreases, but still the trends are heading in the right direction. And so all of this work and all this adaptive changes that we're making, the heart and the legs of that happens at the campus through teachers and through school administrators. So Dr. Pena and Dr. Washington will speak to a little bit about what they're doing to support that work at the campus level.
President Jackson, Board, and Dr. Scribner, as described on this slide, all campuses identified a student support team at the start of the school year. Dr. Washington will provide additional details hereafter. The journey for elementary and secondary schools truly began with a targeted focus on teaching the first 5. These lessons were designed to create trusting classroom communities, focusing on building trusting relationships to create trusting relationships with the teachers and the students. These lessons are well aligned with the equity and restorative practices previously described by Mr. Steiner. Campuses continue to utilize student and teacher classroom agreements to create healthy dialogue throughout the school year. More specifically, today, aside from creating campus discipline plans, executive directors are actively working with principals to address the third grade increase in discipline referrals. The executive directors and student support services team are working to create specific campus-based strategies to support student behavior and increase student engagement at our schools. To summarize, we're also examining our current elementary insights student discipline referral process to ensure that all students, including those with specific plans and interventions, are appropriate.
So as we shared in our last, presentation, all schools have developed action plans to address disproportionality on their campuses. PBIS, restorative practices, and support plans and student voice are key components in those plans. Principals are able to assess student discipline in real time using the district's principals dashboard. The principals dashboard allows them to see which students have multiple referrals, where there is an increase in teacher referrals and support is needed for maybe classroom management, and to observe if administrators are being consistent in their discipline response for incidents. Principals meet weekly with their SST teams and with their administrative teams to view and plan and track progress of the action plan. Executive directors and principals also meet weekly at the secondary level during campus visits in order to assess discipline and determine if there are additional resources and supports needed. With that said, Board, if you have any questions, we will entertain them.
Trustee Paz.
Thank you. Okay, so first I want to go kind of back to the training that we're providing. So we have put now 1,000 employees through the Beyond Diversity training. Is that?
That is
what it
correct.
said? Okay. So what happens after the training? So you've been through the 2 days of Beyond Diversity, you're reared up and ready to go, or in some instances, people are not reared up and ready to go. They're feeling very fragile and attacked maybe. And we've had some mixed reviews on it, and that's something that I think that it's very important to acknowledge. So what happens after that point? How are we continuing to follow up with both the people that go into Beyond Diversity and feel very fulfilled from what they've gotten, and then also the ones that come out with a lot of questions and not really knowing what to do next?
After you finish the first, the entry-level seminar, which is Beyond Diversity, if it is a central level, they may not have additional seminars. But what we ask our supervisors and others to model the use of the protocol and introduce it in whatever work they're performing throughout the district. At the campus level, we ask principals to share about their own. It's all about self-reflection and where they're entering the conversation as a racial being. So we don't ask them to redeliver the seminars. That's not what we want them to do. We want them to become comfortable with use of the protocol, model it, and encourage some teachers after they've gone through Beyond Diversity to begin using the protocol and the other tools that are introduced throughout the seminars as well.
And so what expectations are set specifically for our campus leaders after Beyond Diversity? What are they, do they then go, so they're obviously talking about it on the campus, but what, I guess, what kind of accountability, or are there expectations that are set after that training?
There are. And with our cohort 1, which is our first cohort of principals, I met with them last spring. So they had a full year to self-reflect, try it on their own, the protocol. Then I had expectations set. We gave those expectations, talked about them, and it was the things that we would ask. Share with your staff what it meant to you. What is the equity work that you're engaged in? First, some of the schools may not have even known they were involved in any racial equity work. So we wanted them to do that, and then to model it, and then start to use the protocol, which is usually the first two, the engage in the conversation, isolate race, personal, local, and immediate. And then also, something we start just recently is working more extensively, shall I say, with our executive directors that are the direct supervisors of the principal, so that they can support and ensure that the work is moving forward at the campus level.
Awesome. Okay, and then one more question, and then I'll move on. So going on to the restorative practices work. So a few months ago, there was an article kind of making its way around. There was an op-ed written by, I think it was a high school or middle school teacher, and he was talking about how unsafe his job is, and he's a teacher, not a boxer, and just the general, I guess, I don't want to say trend because it's not a trend, but the feeling that some teachers have that they are unsafe in their classrooms and there are assaults from students. And that's something that I've heard, I've seen several of our own employees discuss, and I don't know whether that is an issue or not. But I guess, is that an issue in Fort Worth ISD? And if so, how do we reconcile the safety of our teachers and administrators with the, providing restorative approach to our students who are, especially the ones that are in those situations that might need the restorative approaches the most?
Right. Well, so restorative is about striking a balance, right? So one of the first things we talk with folks about when we train them is that it's not a fix for everything. And when we talk about student and staff safety, that's paramount. So when we talk about those extreme offenses, those are the numbers that we're seeing more and more reflected in those suspensions. Since 2013-14, we have 7,000 less suspensions that have occurred. Most of those 7,000 are discretionary offenses. What's left as we get lower and lower in those numbers are the most serious offenses where we feel like there's absolutely no other choice in terms of the safety of staff and students but to remove. The difference with the restorative lens would be in thinking that the consequence itself is going to teach new behavior. That's traditional thinking. What restorative says is we need to remove the student for safety, but during that time there's work that needs to be done to help that student reflect on what did I do, what have I been thinking about and processing since that time, who was harmed, how were they impacted, and what do I need to do to make that right? And so what we do while the student is gone is facilitate that reflection and make sure that there's a transition process when they come back so that hopefully they've actually learned something from it. There's an opportunity for them to repair that harm with whoever it was harmed, whether it was a student or a teacher, and then change that trajectory permanently as opposed to just putting it aside for a while.
I lied, I have one more question.
Yeah.
So how are we working with our staff that, the teachers and staff that, to get buy-in on implementing those restorative approaches?
So I'll speak to just the general strategy right now where we're at, and then maybe Dr. Penny or Dr. Washington maybe talk about it from the schools level. But we targeted, at this point, we have 73 campuses in the district that are currently eligible to engage and start that journey of teacher training. And it's a 3 to 5 year journey to get all of your faculty trained. So out of those, we have about 30 campuses that are the highest need in terms of behavioral referrals and suspensions, and those 30 campuses account for about 70% of the suspensions. So our support there is heavy in those schools in terms of we have restorative specialists that support them and a coordinator that supports them, and we understand that we start with those teachers that are sort of champions, and we use them to help bring the others along. We don't mandate people go to restorative practice training. It's one of those things that we know that people have to see and feel and experience before they believe it. And there's always some folks that are maybe a little bit slower in coming around to it. And we know that at a campus, our best hope is to get critical mass of 75-80% of our teachers that are on board. And then what we see with some of those folks that are maybe more traditional in thought is that as they start to wonder, why is it that this student is acting up in my class, but you haven't referred them, they start reaching out to us. And so that's what we're seeing more and more is that the teachers that have had some of those biggest struggles, once they see it's working for other people, they're interested. And because we're not forcing it on them, I think they've been much more receptive.
Yeah, so I saw a teacher friend of mine today post on Facebook that she had a kind of a light bulb moment with this student who's been receiving restorative practices in another teacher's classroom, and they came into her classroom and were acting up. And she said after a 2-minute conversation, they went on about their day, which was great for her. And that's why I'm asking all of these questions. I do believe in this work, and like our friend Steve Full says all the time, the devil is in the details. And I want to make sure that we're rolling this out right. So, thank you for the report. Good job.
Trustee Dr. Ann Sutherland.
Thank you, President Jackson. I have a couple small comments. I appreciate the report, it's very nicely done, and the data is satisfying. It just dawned on me that we have at least 3 candidates for the election in the audience. And I am thinking, first I was thinking that we should make sure that we have handouts available for them, for all candidates, when we have it. But beyond that, and I don't know all the candidates, but I suspect some are not here. And so I'm thinking, can we have enough for the candidates that show up here when we give handouts?
Yeah, and that's procedural, and we can work on that
Okay.
after the meeting.
Second, well, I was hoping it could get them right away because it's a very important report. And the second thing I was thinking, Dr. Scribner, is can we post them with the agenda for the meeting on the, I think it's on the board website, so that people that are not here, and those that are here will have access. If you could post those, kind of like first thing in the morning, I think that would be really helpful, because I get tired of scanning them and sending them out. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Trustee Ramos.
So I've been rather tough on the leadership on this topic, and I guess I'm wondering if the state hadn't passed that law on the suspensions, how long would it have taken Fort Worth ISD to get data like that? And even at that, we're still overrepresented on the black community on suspensions, right? So I'm really kind of, I don't want to be so negative to beat up on administration on this topic. And at the same time, I'm furious to see those numbers, to see that black children, we reflect, Fort Worth ISD reflects what it looks like in the state, and what it looks like in the country. And I'm really just looking for the day that we are the leaders in this work, that those numbers don't look like that, right? And I know that it's a massive system, and we got a lot of work to do, and at the same time, I can't help but feel sick to my stomach that that's where we're at. I keep asking, are we assessing young people? What are the adaptive solutions that we're proposing in addition to what you have? I'm certain that districts across the country that are really serious about plugging up the school-to-prison pipeline are doing things. The monies are being invested into stopping this. We've got the Appleseed report. We have the data. We know the research, and yet still we're not there. I don't even think we're really close to there with those numbers looking like that. And I thank you for sticking to the protocol, isolating race, right? Entertaining multiple perspectives. I don't know. I wonder, all those young people that are the referrals, right? All those young people that are being suspended, I got to keep asking, are we assessing them? What are we doing? And I'm pretty sure, I think I know the answer, knowing that we usually have one interventionist per campus. And I got to bring up something that I've been discussing with Dr. Scribner and his team. J.P. Elder, the largest middle school in the district, and we still only have one interventionist for that entire campus. We have street fights because we have a technical solution to kick kids off the campus as soon as school is over. And I really did not want to do this because I'm the one that's always promoting how all the positive things that are happening in the community. But this is one where, again, I can't sit silently because the calls are coming in. You could Google JP Elder fights. You can look it up on YouTube. That we're having fights on our campuses, and I wonder, where are the adults? Where are the adults? That we can have fights and they're posted on social media, that they're posted on YouTube, and then now I'm coming home and I'm seeing fights in the streets. It's like a swarm of bees of young people, middle schoolers, and that's like the cool thing to do, and we can't get to that. We can't get to the root causes of that they're fighting behind the Northside Library. I know we can do better, And I know that this leadership team has the capacity to figure out these solutions instead of just giving technical recommendations or whatever that looks like. It's got to stop. And one thing I will ask, that we do have a parent meeting at JP Elder soon and not push this off, because I've got parents calling, frustrated, and anywhere else that we may be having high incidents, that we do include the community, the parents, that we figure out collective solutions. You know, when I lived in the suburbs, we had watchdogs, and dads and parents and uncles and grandparents volunteered to walk around the campus, build a relationship with the students, build a relationship with the administration and the teachers, and guess what? Didn't have these kinds of issues out there. So I'm really just looking for what's out there. Because if we're going to keep leaning on the same group of folks that we have in our district, I'm not beating up on them because they're doing tremendous work, but I know that they're also overloaded. And I hear it from teachers as I walk into JPL regularly. I wasn't trained to do this. I was trained to teach, not to be a juvenile probation officer or an interventionist or to be tackling root causes in the home. What are we going to do with our budget this next cycle to really put people in engaged community members who can truly get to root causes so we can partner with our schools that are supposed to be safety zones, not pipelines to the prison system?
Norman Robbins.
Thank you, President Jackson, and thank you for this focus. It's really important. I've always been frustrated in the length of time that it's taking us to get up to speed, and I think Mr. Steiner, you mentioned that it'd take another 3 to 5 years to get every professional in the school trained, and that's just too long. Please investigate ways that we can shorten the time frame and get all of our schools trained in this just as fast as possible. The impact on our students is just huge if we can do this properly, and if we don't, then we just keep failing them. And so any way that we can expedite rolling out this program, and I know it's very complicated and very complex, I think we would all appreciate. So thank you.
Trustee Moss.
Thank you, President Jackson. I think I've said enough from the last meeting. But when I looked at the scores, when we disaggregated the number of students being suspended in all of our schools, I don't know the problem, and I don't know how we are to solve the problem, but what I do know is that Dr. Scribner is the superintendent, and you are administration. So I'm depending on Dr. Scribner to work with administration because we only hold Dr. Scribner accountable. So we do need to see some changes in the numbers. And it is, when people talk about our schools and how we are suspending our students, I don't have an answer. But I know that it has to be an answer. But I want us to look at, before we did look at the schools and how I think it's the assistant principals, how the assistant principals were suspending the students. So I want us to, maybe we need to look at that again, and we might have new assistant principals, because we did find out that they were not really listening to our students. So we need to, I think we need to maybe do something different rather than continuing on the path that we were going. And also look at who we have working with our students, the programs that we have brought in, and see maybe we can partner with the programs that I'm talking about. I started to say dance, but From the Heart and Girls Inc. Maybe they can work together, because each one bring a different set of skills to the table. And I know Girls Inc. build confidence in the students, and From the Heart has a different curriculum. And so maybe we can look at what each program brings to the table, and maybe we can do some different things, because we do need to be looking at why our students are being suspended, and also trying to create a program that maybe it will help. And I know that suspensions will not, just totally go away, but to look at numbers, when you look at a school and that school suspended, 400 and some students, or 500 or 700 students, and you look at elementary and all the grade levels, it just makes you feel sad. But I think you said we started in 2013 with the program that you're working
With
with?
positive behavioral supports, yes, ma'am.
Okay, and this is 2019?
Yes, ma'am.
You're almost over. So you're talking about 6 years, 5 years. And so I think that's long enough, and I think it said, 3 to 5 years, whatever program you're using, you should see some results. And I know administration always told me that, Ms. Moss, it's not going to happen the first year, second year. You need to be chill. So I've been chilling, and I've chilled for 5 or 6 years. So it's time for us to do something different. And I agree with my colleagues. We just have to do something. And I'll leave it there.
Trustee Luebanes.
Thank you, President Jackson. So on page 10, are we using the same criteria from 2014 to 2018 to suspend students?
So the state criteria haven't really changed. The biggest piece that's changed is that administrators are required to consider mitigating factors before they make that decision. Even an in-house suspension, they have to consider, is the student homeless? Is there a mental illness issue? Is there a primary health care issue? Are they pregnant? So if there's mitigating factors, we need to take those into account before we make a decision to suspend. So that's probably the biggest difference, which is largely due to some of the decrease, right? It's made it harder for the adults to make those decisions in the campuses. The other piece I'd say is that there are two isolated issues. Decreasing suspensions is one thing. Addressing disproportionality is something separate. They work together, and I think we've seen some impact in decreasing suspensions. The work that's in front of us right now, though, is disproportionality, and that's where we as a team, you're right, Mrs. Moss, we're having to think very carefully about what we do differently at the campus level to change that, because those are all about intersection points between adults and kids. Every one of those numbers is a decision that was made, and we're trying to influence how that decision gets made right now.
So how long it took to get that 1,500 teachers trained to do
So,
this?
yeah, what started in 2013-14 was the positive behavioral supports, the umbrella philosophy for us in terms of discipline. The restorative practices piece, the 1,500 teachers, that training started in 2016-17, so we're just entering our third year there. And with a campus that comes on board, it generally takes them 3 to 5 years to get all their teachers trained. What determines that timeline is really the availability, because we're pulling teachers off campus for 2 consecutive full days. We offer it in the summer, but we also do it during the year, and we provide substitutes for those schools. So it's a matter of logistics and trying not to disrupt the day-to-day environment by pulling too many teachers. So they have to strategically kind of figure out when they want to send a team of 6th grade teachers or 7th grade teachers, for example.
On Mr. Norman said about what can we do to expedite the process and getting the rest of the teachers trained on this?
So I think the biggest things that we look at there that constrain us right now is, as you said, the training is pretty intensive. It's a 2-day training. It's generally capped at about 100 people, and the bulk of that 2 days is spent in small groups of 10 people practicing restorative practice strategies. So it's very intensive, emotional. It's similar to some of what we do in the equity training. So if we make it too large, it's very hard to have that kind of intimacy that's required to really get people to reflect and think about changing their mindsets. We can do that. The next barrier then is because we have a consultant that helps us train that. The next barrier then is looking at cost. We have a fixed amount of money that we allocate for restorative practice training, which came from what we used to spend on the truancy court. And so that amount allows us to train, roughly 12 times a year. So 1,200 people a year is about the maximum amount we can do at this point.
And if I might add, just to offer, and certainly not as an excuse, but I talked about systemic transformation, and your systems are made up of people, and changing beliefs is really difficult, and it takes a little bit of time. And so I do understand we want to move as quickly as we can, but as a newly being trained facilitator, there is pushback often when we start talking about equity, and especially when you're talking about racial equity. So I just wanted to share that with you as well.
Thank you.
Trustee Moss?
I have one question, and if you will work on that one question, not now, I want you to let me know later. When we suspend our students home for 2 or 3 days, and they come back that 3rd or 4th day, what have they gained while at home? Did someone go through some training so when they get back to school, they don't repeat the same behavior? What have they gained at home? I just want you to think about it. And I asked that question because I had my little grandson was suspended, and he enjoyed being at home. So what did he gain being at home? He went right back to school. So just think about that. What do we do? Do we need to suspend them to a classroom or suspend them where they can work harder or something? I don't know the answer, but I just thought about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Ramos?
Sherry Breed, speaking on the protocol and the work that's being done and kind of hovering around this topic, there's something I'd like to share with my colleagues related to this, that there's a continuum of what anti-biased, anti-racist institutions usually go through. And I really honestly feel like we're in that middle category of that continuum. And when the going gets tough on these conversations, it's the reason, of course, they're called courageous conversations, this is where we're going to decide what our identity is going to be, what we're really going to be about. And so I love that in the Beyond Diversity work, I've heard Sherry say it's not enough to say that we're not racist, because obviously by definition, looking at this data, if my child was black, I don't know how comfortable I'd be to send my child to Fort Worth Independent School District right now. So we've got to change that to what we've been talking about in this work, that it's not enough to say I'm not racist. We've got to become anti-racist. We have to become action-oriented institution, growing, moving forward, and this board recognizing that the going is going to get tough because we're covering the most explosive topic in our country. And as what we say as part of our trainings that we're doing across the state and the country, that because this topic is the way it is, we're continually saying race isn't rocket science. It's harder than rocket science. Because rocket science can be taught in K through 12 schools and universities. People are hearing about science, you're learning about it, but we do not teach about the social construct of race. And that being by design keeps us to where we're bumping against one another. And when data is predictable by skin color, it shouldn't be that way, but when we know that it's a construct and it was designed the way it has been, then we know that we got to get to work. So I challenge my colleagues here on the board and that we stay on task, that we are taking on the toughest subject, but as we push through this continuum, there are better days, and the better days is going to be when that data continues to go down, the changes continue to happen, and we do become that model district in the country, in the nation, because we do have a courageous board and a courageous administration. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Ramos. So we have a systemic challenge. You said you can train 1,200 a year. Can you clarify who the 1,200 are and how they're selected?
Sure. So we've targeted campuses to do school-wide RPAT. School-wide means that we don't just train the administrators and the counselors and the interventionists, but we also train the teachers so that the teachers use these strategies, which are very basic strategies about how to connect with kids, how to get to, as Mr. Ramos mentioned, the root causes of what's behind their behavior, not to the depth of a counselor or an interventionist, but to connect to the point that a student trusts them and is willing to disclose maybe why they're acting the way they're acting. And So we target those schools based on who's got the highest number of teacher referrals, who's got the highest number of out-of-school suspensions. We started with the top 30 schools. At this point, we have 73 now, if you start at the top of the highest to the lowest, that are eligible to come into training. If we look at our year one schools that started in 2016-17, we only have a couple of traditional schools that are fully staffed that have trained everybody. Como Elementary has trained everybody. John T. White has trained almost everybody. So it's taken them 3 full years, and then that's not accounting for teacher turnover and other things. So there's a constant churn, and it's going to be a constant effort for us to continue to offer those trainings. I think the prioritization continues to be on those top 30 to 45 schools because they do account for 70 to 80% of our discipline issues. It's not to say that the schools that only suspend 5 or 6 kids can't benefit from this work, because they can and they will. It's just our resources are focused on those schools that really, really need the help right now.
Thank you. And I heard that you have a fixed amount, and it came from the student court.
Yes, that's correct.
So to increase that money, one way would be the programs of choice, which this board has asked for years and years, and that's not you, Mr. Steiner, but this board's asked for at least the last 4 years to cut those and streamline them. And that's one place we can find that money. And if we don't, we continue to operate programs of choice that are not offering any end results for kids. I mean, they're underpopulated programs. If we cut some of the programs of choice back and streamline them, we can take that money and put into this and train more people. My concern would be that you try to train too aggressively and too hard and you can't sustain, and I heard you all say that today. My biggest concern is we're fighting overage, undercredit kids every day. And as Trustee Moss said, when you send kids home, what do they learn? So I think we need to move forward with this work, and we need to find more money to be more aggressive, because with your attrition rates, you're not going to be able to catch up. Thanks. Thank you all. Any other questions? Ms. Paz?
Yes, and President Jackson, this is a question for you. So it's now been 2 months since I first brought a request to the board that we have a meeting specifically for the purpose of discussing racial equity work as it compares to our board governance work and our overall student outcomes. It's my understanding that 4 board members can request a meeting and have it called. I'm not going to speak for the other 3, but I still very much, I think we've had a very robust conversation here today. We still have a full board meeting to go through. I think this is a topic that our district needs to see us as a board engage in, just like we have tonight, in a context where we can talk about it without the pressure of having to go on with a continued meeting. And I would really, keeping with my statements, I would really like to see us have this meeting before we have our next budget update.
So we'll have it in March. Would that be agreeable, Ms. Paz? The regular meeting or a separate meeting? Let's clarify and get it on the record, please.
So with that, if I may, we had, actually this morning in leadership meeting, talked about our March upcoming meetings, and so we'll have to verify with Trustee Paz your request. We had originally talked about doing a budget workshop on March the 5th. The following week is the week of spring break. Our regular meeting in March is March the 19th, and then we were planning on having the racial equity meeting with regard to student support and discipline on March the 26th. We're happy to flip-flop those if it makes more sense.
I'm just one trustee that's, I would defer to the board.
Thank you. So that was our conversation this morning with the leadership team, and we certainly can review with the board and plan our March meetings here in the next remainder of this week.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Norman Robbins?
Thank you, President Jackson. Since we have a work session scheduled for March the 5th, why couldn't we talk about this subject? Because there are budget implications for it, and maybe you all could get creative between now and then and help us figure out a way that we could speed this thing up.
Sure.
Allocate more resources.
Happy to do that.
Dr. Sutherland?
Just a small comment that some of you probably aren't aware of what we're talking about with the schools of choice. There are a number of schools of choice in the district. I forget how many, and I forget how many people are in, students are in them, but basically the cost of providing this education with these very small class sizes is approximately twice what it is with a regular district. And I remember, the only number I can remember is that I remember last year.
Point of order, Madam President, this is not germane to the conversation.
Counsel,
Wait a minute,
Counsel, would you
she
please-
mentioned the schools of choice.
Is it in
So
regard
if-
to
if-
student discipline and?
Yes, it applies to the budget and the thing, I mean, somebody mentioned that. and
I
just
mentioned programs of choice with a way to improve
Right.
financial.
My intent of saying it was to explain to people who don't understand, they're sitting there, that the difference in cost is about 100%.
This is update is what the topic is.
So Toby was out of choice, out of order too then?
No.
It's the same thing, schools of choice.
Can we move on?
Yes.
Thank you. Moving on to public comment. This time we'll hear public comment. Let me remind you that because of restrictions by the Texas Open Meetings Act, board members may not engage in a verbal exchange about a subject that has not been posted. We will listen and take notes, but the board is prohibited from responding to any inquiries made during a board meeting on any topic not posted on the agenda. However, the board may reply with, 1, a statement of specific factual information given in response to the inquiry, 2, recitation of existing policy in response to the inquiry, or 3, direct the person to visit with staff about the issue. While the board listens to concerns of a general nature and issues of common and individual concern, the board will not hear complaints about specific individual employees or public officers during the public comment session. Speakers shall refrain from mentioning names of individual employees or public officers during their comments. Any employee, parent, or other member of the public is asked to comply with the appropriate grievance policy to have a complaint heard pursuant to the applicable board policy. In accordance with Board Policy BED Local, speakers have a 3-minute time limit, and we ask that you please observe this rule. Furthermore, a speaker may not relinquish his or her time to another speaker. Delegations of 5 or more persons shall appoint one person to present their views before the board with the time not to exceed 5 minutes. Our first speaker is Julie Jackson. Our second speaker is Harper Jackson. If you'd like to, Harper, you can come down with her.
Good evening. Thank you, Dr. Scribner. Thank you, President Jackson, and thank you, esteemed board members. I appreciate the freedom that I have to speak my mind in front of you and the attendees tonight. Last time I spoke here, I talked about loaded baked potatoes and school of choice and program choices. Tonight, I'm here again to talk culinary delights, gumbo, and how it relates to the current 8-period per day schedule. I come from a really strong line of strong women from New Orleans. My great-grandmother, my grandmother, and my mother, all born, raised in the New Orleans area. My grandmother only had a 3rd grade education, but she taught me, as passed down through generation, now I'm the 4th generation, how to make an excellent gumbo with the best roux you could possibly imagine. Her advice to me was more like life lessons. So this is what she told me. Advice is more life skills than cooking. Gumbo lovers know that roux is the secret to a good gumbo. The roux is the base, and it takes a long time to simmer, and it takes a long time to cook. And you cannot cook a gumbo roux in 30 minutes. Education is much like the roux of a gumbo. It has layers that are added on each year that build to that perfect culinary savory delight, college education. The current 8 periods does not allow for mastery of content. Realistically, about 35 minutes of class is dedicated to classroom content teaching. And that is if we're in a utopian atmosphere. And we know that the classroom is never perfect. And when you have 30 kids, there's going to be a breakdown in the system. So you're not getting 45 minutes, you're not getting 30 minutes, you might be getting 20 minutes of class education. And this puts a stress on teachers, students, and parents as well. The class is rushed, and like roux, it doesn't have time to simmer. The whole pot of gumbo is ruined. You cannot, again, my grandmother stated, you cannot make roux in 30 minutes. Just like you can't master content with the current system as it is. You cannot expect our kids to score high on their exams when not enough time is given for mastery. Indiana State University did a study on and they've proven the results. Oh, that fast?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Harper Jackson.
Thank you, Board of Members, for my chance to talk. I am Harper Jackson. I am a junior at Benbrook Middle High School, and I can attest to the effects of the 8-period schedule on my time in class. In many of my classes, we have 45 minutes to work. We have to take 5 minutes to take attendance, and we are given 10 minutes for a warm-up and 5 minutes to discuss it minimum. That is 20 minutes right there. That is half of my class period to do something that is required by the teacher. I am forced to learn in this time and to do an hour's work of homework afterwards. On top of this, there are distractions. That 20 minutes in class can be extended to 25 very easily with a rowdy class. That robs us of our learning. And quite frankly, it's bound to happen with a class of 30 students. Because of this, I am under way more stress to achieve. I am forced to take extra measures to ensure that I learn. I come in early and stay late. This is a privilege that I have because I don't ride the bus. What about students that do ride the bus? They do not get the same opportunities that I do. I say this because there needs to be change. The 8-period schedule is putting more stress and work on students on top of responsibilities that we already have. I'm just one of the 1,000 kids at my school that feels this way. 45-minute classes a day is not enough time to prepare me for college. Board members, I ask you, visit my school. See what a 45-minute class looks like. That is not enough time. Please, think about getting rid of the 8 periods before your vote. Ask students. Talk to us. See what model fits our learning for the highest achieving outcomes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Harper, and thanks for being here tonight. Bratavian Lewis and Janie Ginn. Mr. Lewis?
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. My name is Bratavian Lewis. I am in the Social Studies Department over at Eastern Hills High School. I teach courses that range from world history, Latin American perspectives, African American studies, as well as world geography. In terms of racial equity, I would like to commend the board and all others involved that make it happen for rolling out the multicultural studies course. This is my first year being involved with the course, but the impact that it's had on the youth this year alone has increased student interest, student motivation, and a desire to be more than what they experience on a day-to-day basis. Within my course, we have touched on topics ranging from ancient African kingdoms all the way up to Trump's border wall, and conscious and thoughtful things that we could do to provide unifying solutions. This course has allowed for kids, to think positively and thoughtfully in a way that will impact the world and their community in a positive way. As a facilitator of the course, moving forward, I feel as if the content taught could be more thorough. But if the teachers are given the liberty and flexibility as I have been given, I feel like as long as they're capable of, I guess, the content or going in as in-depth as they're capable of, as long as they have the liberty to do so, that will suffice for now. I also think that we need to be mindful and conscious of putting teachers with strong backgrounds and interests and knowledge in front of the students that teach this information. With that said, I just want to thank you all for your time, and y'all have a great night.
Thank you. Janie Ginn.
Hey, good evening, President Jackson, members of the board, Superintendent Scribner. At the end of last meeting, it was mentioned that the board would like to discuss the 8-period day. And I heard the superintendent say that it was probably an operational matter in looking at board policy. I see that it is under his authority and it won't be discussed. But none of the parents, students, or teachers were asked if they wanted this. It came from the top down, which has been a problem in this district for a long time now. It used to be schools would ask up for the help that they needed at their individual campus, teachers in their individual classrooms. But a lot of times now, it comes from central administration down to the schools, and you don't really know what it's like in our specific schools, in our specific classrooms, the makeup of our students. Several years ago, we had a curriculum audit done. Dr. Holly Captain presented information, and she said the best judge of what students need is the classroom teacher. You've kind of heard that tonight, even with Mr. Ramos and Dr. Steinert on the report that you just received. And that, one, we need more people in the schools to help. You need extra people. We've cut a lot of extra people, extra positions. The person that doesn't have a charge of a full class, but can help to talk and make relationships with those kids or give a little bit of a cooling off time to some, or just an opportunity for them to have a say to somebody they're not in conflict with. So anyway, I realize that I want you to realize that in the course of a day with 8 passing periods of 5 minutes each, that's a full class period that they're just passing in the hall. And a little while back when we got the results of our accountability report, the Fort Worth Star-Telegram had an article about it, and Dr. Scribner indicated that the district's accountability rating results showed struggles in the middle and high schools, so they need to have a focus. Well, is really the best practice then to shorten the periods? You've heard a good presentation from a student about the struggle that it is. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we'll now recess and reconvene in the board conference room. In accordance with the open meetings law, the board opened the meeting at 5:30 PM in the boardroom with a quorum present, recessed to open session in this boardroom, and is now reconvened at 6:48 PM in open session in the boardroom. As board president, I'm making the following statement in accordance with board policy BBFA local. This is a reminder to all board members of the conflict of interest requirements and disclosure requirements you may have for matters under consideration on the agenda for this meeting. If required by law, board members shall recuse themselves from all discussion and shall abstain from voting on any matter pertaining to any such disclosure. Are there any questions on our consent agenda items? Guess what? You guys will never have a DVT with this board. You're up and at 'em. We're going to move on. This concludes our discussion of agenda items. DVT is deep vein thrombosis. You will not throw a clot. We're done. In accordance with the open meetings law, this board opened the meeting at 7:30 PM in this boardroom with a quorum present. We recessed and reconvened to open session in the board conference room, adjourned regular session, convened executive session, adjourned executive session, and now reconvened open session at 7:29 PM in the boardroom with a quorum present. Do I have a motion accepting our consent agenda items? Moved by trustee Needham, seconded by trustee Sims. Any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, please move to voting, remembering that the humans here are faster than the computer.
Remembering what?
The humans are faster than the computer, but Faye tricked me, it was faster. And the motion passes unanimously. Moving on to our action items, no action is required on items A, B, and C, so we will move on to D. Approved performance contract with Texas Wesleyan University to operate and manage select Fort Worth ISD campuses. I want to move on that one, please. Seconded by Norman Robbins. Any discussion? I did, I'm sorry. My daughter would be angry with me. Any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, move to voting. And the motion passes unanimously. 14E, approve resolution and order adopting polling locations and revised order of election. Moved by trustee Needham, seconded by trustee Paz. Any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, please move to voting. And the motion passes unanimously. 14F, approve the traditional calendar for the 2019-20 school year. Do I have a motion? Moved by trustee Needham, seconded by trustee Luébanos. Any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, let's move to voting. And the motion passes unanimously. We are now to number 15 on our agenda, comments by board members and superintendent on current district attendance activities. Anybody? Trustee Robbins.
Thank you, President Jackson. Each year, the Downtown Rotary Club hosts their annual Rotary Four-Way Speech Competition in which the Young Women's Leadership Academy is the chosen participant. On Friday, February 23rd, 5 YWLA gyms participated in the Rotary Club of Downtown Fort Worth annual Rotary Four-Way Speech Competition. Rotary's four-way speech test is: 1, is it the truth? 2, is it fair to all concerned? 3, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And 4, will it be beneficial to all concerned? These young women did an excellent job examining their selected topics using the Rotary Four-Way test. Topics included teen pregnancy, suicide, the need for recess in all grade levels, natural hair acceptance, and immigration laws. Students stood up in front of the entire Rotary Club and recited 5-minute speeches from a podium with just a 3x5 note card. The students' stage presence and presentations were astounding. Congratulations to YWLA senior Ty Williams for her first place victory and 11th grader Saria Veal for her second place win. The other competitors included 9th grader Gabriela Campos, 10th grader Leslie Guillermo Torres, and 10th grader Penelope Huff. Ty Williams will go on to compete in the regional competition, and college-bound advisor Kendra Strange helped orchestrate the entire school's involvement. You all would have been very, very proud. I was very pleased to be present, so congratulations to them all.
Thank you, trustee Robbins.
Thank you.
Trustee Needham.
Jackson, a few minutes ago, we approved a contract with Texas Wesleyan University, and it's the first in the state, I understand, using a new law, 1882, where we get paid an extra $1,900, $1,800 per student, and work with Texas Wesleyan is working with our 5 campuses that are, what are they called? Leadership campuses, and it's going to be, it's brand new, and it's going to be on the cutting edge, and we're setting an example for the whole state on what can be done when a school system joins with a university, and they hope to send students over to student teach, and our students will benefit a great amount, and we will get, how many students in that school? Well, they vary, but an extra $1 million per school. Is that about right?
So for the 5 leadership academies, we're averaging about 2,300 students that it will impact. So our intent is, of course, to maintain our leadership academy model, which we're looking at, when you look at enrollment and ADA, hopefully around $1 million per campus.
Okay. So I want to congratulate staff again. I know you all have worked very hard in the last several months, and the Texas DEA Commissioner, Mike Morath, is the ultimate person to approve it. And we look forward to having that done in, another month?
Yes, our application is due by April 1st, and we hope to hear something very soon after the deadline. We're very anxious to get started, and we would like to recognize TWU as well. As much work as we put in, they have put in to make this happen. So we're very appreciative of that partnership.
And we're not having to pay them for any of the management. I still can't understand such a deal. I keep asking staff.
And rainwater as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Needham. Thank you, President Slaybach, who is the president, Fred Slaybach, of Texas Wesleyan University. Let's give him a round of applause for this. Thank you for being here with us tonight, and on that, we'll adjourn on Texas Wesleyan University Rams.